So today is going to be a rather long segment that we're going to be covering on Miss Sally Yates. I think at this point, everybody has pretty much seen excerpts of these videos from the hearing that I've had the privilege of watching, and it's a rather dull experience. I don't wish that on anybody to sit there and look at over 3 hours of a hearing, but it's really entertaining when you look at it. But what I'm going to do is that one of the videos that has become rather popular is the exchange between Ted Cruz and Sally Yates. Now, I'm also going to be breaking down what a lot of this information actually means, and a lot of other information that some people may have not even known about, actually, that led up to that point, and I'm going to break it down for you. But now we're going to go to the clip, and we'll come back and we'll discuss it.
Is it correct that the Constitution vests the executive authority in the President?
Yes.
And if an Attorney General disagrees with a policy decision of the President, a policy decision that is lawful, does the Attorney General have the authority to direct the Department of Justice to defy the President's order?
I don't know whether the Attorney General has the authority to do that or not, but I don't think it would be a good idea, and that's not what I did in this case.
Well, are you familiar with 8 U.S.C. Section 1182?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Well, it is the binding statutory authority for the executive order that you refused to implement and that led to your termination. So it certainly is a relevant and not a terribly obscure statute. By the express text of the statute, it says, quote, whenever the President finds that the entry of any alien or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem appropriate. Would you agree that that is broad statutory authorization?
I would, and I am familiar with that, and I'm also familiar with an additional provision of the INA that says no person shall receive preference or be discriminated against in issuance of a visa because of race, nationality, or place of birth. That, I believe, was promulgated after the statute that you just quoted. And that's been part of the discussion with the courts with respect to the INA, is whether this more specific statute trumps the first one that you just described. But my concern was not an INA concern here. It rather was a constitutional concern, whether or not this the executive order here violated the Constitution, specifically with the Establishment Clause and equal protection and due process.
There is no doubt the arguments you laid out are arguments that we can expect litigants to bring, partisan litigants who disagree with the policy decision of the President. I would note on January 27, 2017, the Department of Justice issued an official legal decision, a determination by the Office of Legal Counsel, that the executive order, and I'll quote from the opinion, the proposed order is approved with respect to form and legality. That's a determination from OLC on January 27th that it was legal. 3 days later, you determined, using your own words, that although OLC had opined on legality, it had not addressed whether it was, quote, wise or just.
And I also, in that same directive, Senator, said that I was not convinced it was lawful. I also made the point that the Office of OLC looks purely at the face of the document, and again, makes a determination as to whether there is some set of circumstances under which some portion of that EO would be enforceable, would be lawful. They importantly do not look outside the face of the document. And in this particular instance, particularly where we were talking about a fundamental issue of religious freedom, not the interpretation of some arcane statute, but religious freedom, it was appropriate for us to look at the intent behind the President's actions, and the intent is laid out in his statements.
Final, very brief question. In the over 200 years of the Department of Justice history, are you aware of any instance in which the Department of Justice has formally approved the legality of a policy and 3 days later the Attorney General has directed the Department not to follow that policy and to defy that policy?
I'm not, but I'm also not aware of a situation where the Office of Legal Counsel was advised not to tell the Attorney General about it until after it was over.
Chris Pandolfo from the Conservative Review also made some comments on this. To read from his article, to summarize, Senator Cruz is arguing that a 1952 statute grants the permission of the United States to suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens whatsoever when he deems it in the national interest to do so. Yates countered that a 1965 statute could trump the statute Cruz cited, limiting the president's authority, but a justification for refusing to enforce the president's executive order is that, in her view, the statute is unconstitutional. So first of all, the way he framed that is not necessarily correct, at least as far as the last part is concerned. Her argument wasn't that the statute was unconstitutional, not necessarily. She was looking at it purely from the perspective of a constitutional issue, where we talk about the Establishment Clause. It prohibits the establishment of a religion by Congress. That is where the situation comes to pass, where the executive order could be viewed as unlawful. But I also noticed in this article that he conveniently left out one other part that she had actually brought up, was intent. Conveniently, around the same time that the hearing was going on, there was another article that was that was actually multiple press articles had reported on the statement that the Muslim ban was actually removed from Trump's website during the press briefing. Now, this was part of this was the website that had all of his campaign promises on there. And one of them was actually about the Muslim ban. And to read from that, Donald Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representative can figure out what's going on. According to Pew Research, among others, there is a great hatred towards Americans by large segments of the Muslim population. This was actually taken from his website before he took it down. And if you go to that website now, which I'll actually link in the description below, you will no longer find it there anymore. And it's really convenient, like how the basis to which he went about making this executive order on. This was the inspiration where he drew this idea from. He went ahead and took that off the website to try to hide it from people, because a lot of news outlets were asking about this question, and that was the point of the whole exchange right there, is that it becomes a constitutional issue when you are creating a detrimental harm to another religion, and you're potentially establishing one religion over another. And to everybody who would make an argument that these people coming over, they're not citizens, they're not entitled to any. They're not entitled to any rights or whatever. That's sort of missing the point there, because the president, who is also a citizen, who's our commander in chief, is writing an executive order creating the establishment of a religion, potentially in this particular case, where he may be targeting a few select countries that may have a varying degree of religions or whatever, but these are Muslim majority countries. And the point to where he drew the inspiration for this particular executive order is directly tied from his campaign promise. That much is not a secret. So you're really sort of missing the point if you're just going to bring up that they don't have those same protections that we're entitled to. It doesn't really matter, because the guy who's doing the executive order, unfortunately, is. So yeah, it's how you pretty much get them.